Okay, I'm feeling like this is like a little bit of a full circle moment because we were just talking before we started. Like we met in 2016 when you were my student, which is like I'm trying not to feel like horrendously old.
Yes.
Did you volunteer
Same.
with me or did we just like meet?
Yes. We met and then I begged and pleaded to let myself volunteer with you.
Because I do
Like,
feel like
please
I'm
take me
an
on.
like unreliable person from a memory standpoint, which has sort of always been my way. But now that I'm in my mid 40s, it's even worse. Like I tell my husband he's my elephant because I'm like, he'll be like, "Oh, do you remember when we did this and you were wearing this?" And you said, I was like, no, like that did not even like occur in my memory until you just reminded me of it now.
That's funny you say that because that sounds like a very ADHD way of remembering things. Like I can't remember what I did yesterday, what I ate for breakfast, but I can be like, do you remember September 17th? You were wearing a red sweater, the breeze was blowing on your face, and we were doing this, this, and this.
Yeah,
People are like,
that's amazing.
what are you talking about? And then I'll just like retrace the
That
event.
is incredible. Like I wish I had that recall. And I always worry about it because I feel like, and I think this will be an interesting conversation with the neurodivergence piece, because when you don't interact in a way that people expect you to, there can be this expectation. It's like, oh, well, maybe that didn't matter to you
Mm.
as much as it did to me. I was like, no, things matter to me. It's just that's how my memory works. That's how my brain works. I can't really fix it or help it.
Yes, that resonates a lot because there's in the neurodivergent community, there's this like assumption that you're rude if you aren't acting the way that you should be. But yeah,
Yeah,
we
totally.
can talk
Well,
more
like
about
maybe
that.
let's start there a little bit because you received a diagnosis late. Like this is not something you've known about yourself since you were a kid. Like how did you sort of come to diagnosis?
Yeah, it's a it's a long story, but so I've been working in eating disorders for 7 years now, and I was working with a number of clients who had a bunch of psych reports, and one person was actually three women my age. One was getting diagnosed, one was diagnosed, and one was like querying if she had ADHD, and just like because the psych report is so detailed and like talks about like childhood and challenges they're experiencing and like kind of other mental health challenges. And then these people had eating disorders. And so, like, talking about their relationships with food, I'm like reading these like stories of these people being like, huh, that sounds really familiar. And so I just went to my doctor and was like, could it be that I have ADHD and these things that I've been struggling with for a really long time? Could they be related to that? And she was like, yeah, we've never actually explored that. And so she gave me the self-assessment through Cadra, which is where, if you're ever wondering if you are ADHD, that's where I would direct people to. And you do this self-assessment, you kind of go through some of the traits, and I flagged extremely high on all of them. And then you need to get, if you're an adult, you need to get either like a teacher or a parent to go and do the same type of assessment, because if you have ADHD as an adult, you had it as a child. And so I asked my parents, and my mom, she was like, "Oh, you're just like every other kid. Like, there's nothing different about you." I'm like, "Come on, mom. Like, we got to think about this a bit more critically." So she did it, and I think she was like really conservative on her answers. So like they were positive, but um, it wasn't like, super obvious with her answers. And then I asked my dad, and I asked him again, and then I asked him again, and then I asked him again. And finally, my doctor kept being like, I need this survey from your dad. And I had to call him, and I was like, Dad, we're going to go through it on the phone. We're doing it together. And he did the questions like over the phone, and then he sent me a picture. And I think he had like written it on a napkin. It looked like tic-tac-toe on a napkin, and that's what I submitted. And the doctor's like, I'm not even going to review that one. I think I know what side of the family it comes from. And let's start medication. And like starting medication was like the most life-changing experience I have ever gone through, because I was like really afraid to take a stimulant, thinking that like a stimulant is going to make my brain like have thoughts even more
Yeah.
intensely. Like being all over the place, but it just created this like sense of quiet, which like the first time you experience that is it's just so interesting to be like, what? Like I can listen to one thing, I can do one thing rather than like the word neurodivergent was explained to me in the sense of like your brain is diverging in like every direction. And so like you see something which makes you think of that thing, which diverges over here, which makes you think of that thing. And you have to work really hard to like bring it back to focus on the thing that you need to do, which can be really exhausting and distracting if you don't understand that that's happening and then like get frustrated and mad at yourself. So yeah, like taking the medication really helped me to quiet my brain and like focus on what I needed to do. Um, and like medication doesn't work for everybody, but for me it was really, really empowering and helpful. Um, but yeah, that's kind of like how it happened for me. It was really based on like working with clients and like kind of like seeing myself in them and then reading their stories and being like, yeah, this sounds really familiar to me. And interestingly, like all the anxiety treatment I had done just wasn't working, which is really common, especially for like high masking people, to get treated, especially for assigned female at birth, to get treated for anxiety and then be told, no, you're not neurodivergent. You
Yeah.
make really good eye contact.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's so important to share our stories, because the way that someone else's story was mirroring, hey, this might be me. Like someone listening to this could be like, whoa, oh, is this why? Like, could this be me
Hmm.
too? And, it sends them back to their physician and maybe they now have this answer that they didn't have before. And, because you did your education, like you became a dietitian before your diagnosis. So
Hmm.
what
Yeah,
what was that
undiagnosed.
like? Because this is not
The
an
Wild West,
easy
I call it.
program for anyone who doesn't know dietetics. It's extremely competitive to get in, and it is quite a challenging academic program. Like, what was it like for you dealing with what you at this point maybe thought were frustrations, or like, why is this happening in this way, but actually like making it through your degree?
Yeah, so it's funny when I was reading like your criteria for the podcast and it said like, like what leads you to dietetics, I had to laugh because the short version of that is I have to give credit to our mutual friend Andrea. So one of my best friends, she'd been away, I think at school or living abroad, and we reconnected. And she's like, "What are you doing with your life?" And I was like, "Nothing." She's like, "Do you want to be a dietitian with me? We could move to Vancouver together. And you like food? Like, you don't want to work in the service industry forever. Like, do you want to do it?" I said yes, and I didn't even know what a dietitian was. So there's true undiagnosed ADHD and impulsivity right there. And I'm very grateful for that moment. And that's kind of like what got me into it and even like learning what it was. But then in that process, like meeting the people that are in dietetics or pursuing dietetics are all like brilliant, very like high achieving, a lot of type A type people. And I am not a type A person. I live in chaos a lot of the time. I didn't have good grades. And so like my approach when I looked at like the criteria was like, okay, like there's a practical component, which is where I really thrive. I really like talking to people and I learn better in like doing, but to like memorize things and like the math and sciences component, um, that was what scared me. And so that's actually probably how I met you is I pursued like every practical volunteer dietitian nutrition related experience I possibly could in hopes that I could like talk to like the experience of a dietitian much better than I could, maybe perform academically. And which was great because that prepared me for the practical component of the program. But I lived in like this like shame circle all the time of like, oh my gosh, I got the worst grade in the class. I like people are studying and they're like done studying and I'm like in the beginning of the chapter. And so I had this like major like mental battle of like I'll never be good enough to be a dietitian. I'm never going to pass. I was shocked when I got in. I wouldn't be surprised if I had the lowest GPA to ever get in the program. Once I was on academic probation. I failed two classes. my friends still tease me to this day if we ever talk about physiology. They always say Marilee 2 times, and we make jokes about it. Um, and you'd think I'd be an expert taking it twice, but no. Um, but yeah, so like it was really, really, really hard. And then I actually had a new therapist when I came back to Victoria, which is where I'm from, to do the internship or practicum component of the program. And I was like so anxious, thinking like I'm gonna fail internship, like I can't remember things, I'm so bad at this. And I did a lot of like therapy for anxiety at that point, which was really helpful, and like imposter syndrome. But I actually thrived in internship because it was all the talking to patients and like resonating with their lived experience. And if I didn't remember something, I could just look it up. So that was like really helpful for me, and helped me to be more confident as a dietitian. But yeah, it was really hard. I didn't get diagnosed until probably like 3 years of practice. And I was still with the same therapist, meeting with him, talking about like challenges with charting and like losing things and taking on way too much and being overwhelmed all the time. And yeah, it was just like a series of events. The person I was dating at the time actually asked me if I had hearing problems. And so I was going to get my ears checked, and my roommate at the time was like, "You don't have hearing problems, you're just distracted." And like just like hearing that, I was like, that's so interesting that someone thinks I have hearing problems, and another person's like, "No, no, you can hear fine, you're just distracted." Um, and that was all happening at the same time as like reading these reports. And then my now business partner, Lauren, who's one of my best friends and is also a dietitian, um, she started working with me, and I didn't notice this until like all these things were happening, and I was wondering if I had ADHD. But I would be talking to her, and I just stop, like I just kind of blank pause, stop, and she does this thing where she'd be like, "You were saying that we were doing da 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 da," and I'm like, "Right," and I'm like, "How often do you do that with other people?" She's like, "Do what?" Like retrace their steps in their speaking. She's like, "Oh no, just you." So I was like, okay, there's a lot of things here that are kind of leading me in this direction. But yeah, it was really, really tough. I definitely would befriended like in dietetics, Carol Travis, bless her heart, very patient woman, the head of dietetics at the time. She was lovely of just like helping me try to figure out how to get through, how to stay in the program, being on academic probation. And now I'm very proud to say that I'm a
Yeah.
I'm a good dietitian.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way anymore.
There's so many things that I want to say. The first of which is our profession suffers quite a bit from an utter lack of diversity. White,
Mm,
like female, oh yeah, like
Then,
specific body type, very type A, but also, right, like neurotypical. And I think it is a really important
hmm
thing for us as a profession, but like all healthcare professions, that we start being extremely mindful of diversity in all forms, including, because look for you now, like what a gift it is to have your lived experience influencing your profession, because
mm,
there is like so much that I don't know specifically, which is why I wanted to have this conversation about how neurodivergence actually impacts someone's ability to feed themselves and their nutrition and what might come up for them. And
mm,
unless we have that lived experience and then that building knowledge base, like it's not going to happen if people like me continue to be the future of the profession, right? We have to have this diversity, and we have
hmm
to like draw from all of the strengths of that diversity in order to actually make us more useful as a profession and more helpful.
Yeah, totally. It's so true. And even like there's we need so much more diversity in so many areas, because like even in eating disorders, like the treatment models, the way that we treat people, the bias, it's really shocking. And people get labeled as being like difficult patients, and they get inequitable care. And it's not that they're, you know, a bad patient or they're non-compliant or whatever. The treatment model doesn't meet their needs, and there's no person there that understands their needs because they have no lived experience, or they haven't done enough like trauma-informed care from a person with lived experience for that type of person to actually adapt things in an appropriate way for them. Um, yeah, I could stand on a soapbox on that
This
topic
is
all
the
day long,
perfect
but
place for that, my dear.
it's
So, you know, if dietitians are listening to, like, let's start there. And then I want to really get into like what people need to know for themselves, but also maybe as dietitians listening to this, but like for the dietitians listening to this, where should they be going to educate themselves so that they can do better in their practice, even if it means recognizing what they don't
Mm,
know, because it's now the appropriate time to refer on to someone who does know? Like, where should they be looking for resources?
yeah, that's a good. Um, One thing I want to like just like say about like the neurodivergent community is that if you're a really evidence-informed type A dietitian and that's the first place you're going to go, it's really important to know that the research is majorly lacking. So like I specialize in eating disorders. Eating disorder research is lacking. Um, Neurodivergent research is lacking. So like I would say take it all with a grain of salt, and really listen to people's lived experience because that's often not captured in a lot of research. Um, but yeah, like I in my practice because I'm eating disorders, like I use the Eating Disorders Neurodiversity Australia like clinical guidelines is a really good place to understand like what is neurodivergence, what is ableism, how does neurodivergent impact a person relationship with food, what are vulnerabilities, how can we be better professionals. Like they're really ahead of the game in terms of like practice guidelines and um, neurodivergent affirming care. That language, just like neurodivergent affirming care or trauma informed care, would be probably the place I would recommend someone go to start. If you've never heard those terms, that's where you should be looking, of just like what is that. Understanding the difference of like neurodivergent versus neurodiversity, um, like understanding how like it's not, in the neurodivergent community it's not just seen as like a deficit, or assuming that like we have a lot of bias around neurodivergent folks. So like if you learn more about neurodivergent affirming care and you understand some of that lived experience, and then maybe look at, you know, some of the research and some of the clinical guidelines, but keep in mind that like it's a lot of like youth focused research because that's what we, when we think about like ADHD and autism, we're often talking about kids. We're not often talking about adults. Um, the medication research is often focused on kids. Um, and same with eating disorders. We're often talking about anorexia because it's in a controlled environment. A treatment center is a controlled environment. We're not often talking about, you know, the majority of people in the community that likely also have eating disorders. So, um, yeah, I think just like talking to people that have lived experience is important. But yeah, the affirming
Thank you
care
for that.
is
And
where I
you're
would start.
currently working on some resources, specifically looking at eating disorders in the neurodivergent population, are you not?
Yeah, so I'm one of the I'm in the working group with NEDIC, one of the eating disorder organizations Canada. They're making a resource right now for neurodivergent affirming eating disorder care. It's definitely in like the early stages, but um, so far I'm in love with this project because they've been interviewing practitioners and like people with lived experience, both with eating disorders and being neurodivergent. So there's like professionals who are both neurodivergent and have lived experience of having an eating disorder, and then people with lived and living experience of having an eating disorder who are also neurodivergent, who aren't professionals, and just like coming together to create like what would we make, and what's out there and what is needed and what's missing, because there's so much that's missing. So I kind of have like this like long-winded response for your first question, is that there isn't really like a great resource, especially around nutrition. A lot of resources are like they talk about food in a way that like vilifies certain foods, or talks about them negatively. So like, I don't have anything that I'm like, oh, this is the thing. So I hope we get to make something
Yeah.
like that in this project. Um, but I also don't know how long this project will take because we've got a bunch of neurodivergent people going on tangents in every direction, who are super passionate and excited. But NEDIC is really awesome. They do lots of
Yeah.
resources, so I'm sure they'll be able to contain
I
us.
love it. That's amazing. So maybe let's go there now. So, you know, both for you as a professional, but also, being in your body and, learning to feed yourself and care for yourself. Like, what are some of the challenges that someone with ADHD might actually face just with feeding themselves and figuring out their nutrition?
Yeah, good question. So I don't know if you know this about me, but I also have lived experience of having an eating disorder. So I had a pretty complicated relationship with food. Um, and so like having undiagnosed ADHD, like reflecting back, I can see so many places where I was vulnerable. So like for example, like if you have ADHD and there are impacts to like your executive functioning, your memory recall, um, your like interoception, like how you experience sensations in your body, um, and if your brain is diverging in different directions, you forget things, you can get hyper focused on stuff. So like you may not recognize like your hunger and fullness cues. You may get distracted and like be focused on something and kind of like forget to eat or delay eating because in your brain it's like, well, that's, I'm doing this thing right now. And like there's this fear of like, well, what if I don't come back to it? And if I don't come back to it and I don't finish it, then like that could be bad, or I could get in trouble, or like I could let somebody down. So there's a lot of like shame response that's happening for a neurodivergent person because we live in a world that's not designed for us. And so we're constantly trying to do things in the correct or right way. So if you are like doing something and you're like afraid of stopping, then it's really like inefficient and annoying to have to like go eat something if you feel a bit hungry. And so people get really good at like pushing that sensation out, which will also impact their interoceptive experience. And then when they finally are done what they're doing, well, now their hunger is like intense and they're going to eat, and they also have that impulsivity. So you might be like, more likely to eat really quickly, more likely to eat past the point of fullness, more likely to choose more readily available, quick, convenient foods. And then after that, if you feel uncomfortable, it's like, oh, what did I do? Or I shouldn't have done that, or that's too much, or that food is bad. Um, and then that like adds to this like kind of shame experience. And so like ADHD, especially assigned female at birth, like there's a really high vulnerability for developing like a compensatory eating disorder. So that impulsivity or like challenges with emotional regulation can make someone like more vulnerable to like acting on this, like, well, what do I do now? I need to like deal with this feeling. I don't like this feeling, or I did too much. And so you can see they can get pulled into that place, like um, maybe more vulnerable to be pulled into that place. And then like, just like the overall like labor of feeding yourself, it is like domestic labor to feed yourself. And if you're someone who is struggling with just like operating, naturally, getting dressed, washing yourself, doing things in a routine, that can be really hard for certain neurodivergent people, or a lot of neurodivergent people. Um, and then if you get interrupted, if you like something impacts the chain that you need to do for the routine, like, well, I was going to make this for breakfast, but I didn't go to the grocery store, so I didn't have it. But I thought about how I could go to the grocery store, and instead of going to the grocery store, I sat here and I felt overwhelmed, and so I did nothing. And now I don't have the groceries, I don't have the food. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Now I feel too overwhelmed to eat. So like you can just see like the relationship with food becomes really complicated. Um, and so yeah, it's tough. And a lot of people come to me and they're like, I just like live in chaos like all the time, especially with food. And our society tells us like it's related to willpower and you just have to have more self-control. and you just need to be more disciplined. And for like a neurodivergent person, it's not that they're like, they're not trying. Their brain is actually probably like thinking about it so intensely. Maybe they're making multiple lists about it, how they're going to do it. And then they're just so overwhelmed that they can't do it. And I just add like the other piece that often gets in the way is masking and burnout. So a neurodivergent person to like exist in the world in an acceptable neurotypical way, which I haven't really defined any of these terms, but like neurotypical would be like the majority, so people who are not neurodivergent, and then to be neurodivergent, like you just have different neurocognitive functioning that's very different from like, you know, the societal understanding or experience of being like quote unquote typical. So if you are trying to like act or mask yourself or camouflage yourself to fit in with society, it's really exhausting. It takes a lot of energy. Like I was saying, if your brain's diverting over here, here, and there, it takes a lot of energy to bring it back and be like to focus on this one thing. And so neurodivergent folks often experience a lot of burnout because they're masking a lot of the time. And so if you're in a burnout period, your brain is like offline. So like you could feed yourself maybe when you're at your baseline, okay, and maybe it's a bit chaotic, but it's working. But if you go into a burnout period, like you're just, it's so hard to function. You feel exhausted all the time. Like you don't want to get out of bed, you don't want to get dressed. And it's different from like being in a depressive episode. It's like you're sitting there thinking about it intensely of like what you need to do, what you should do, what you can't do. And you're so exhausted. And so like feeding yourself becomes a really, really challenging task. And then it also sets people up around impulsivity that like you're more vulnerable to food seeking. So like if you're not eating all day because you're so burnt out and then finally start to eat, then you might be more vulnerable to like binge eating, or like ordering, you know, DoorDash over and over again because you can't get out of your house to go buy groceries. Well, now you've just impulsively racked up all this money by feeding yourself with some of these apps that are probably designed to target ADHD people or impulsive people. It's like, did you want to add this to your order? Did you want to add this to your order? Yeah, so there's so many things that make people vulnerable and really complicate their relationships with food. And we just live in this world where people just feel bad about it all the time.
In your
And lots of
practice,
things.
and when you're working with people, like what are some of the strategies? Like, are there some simple strategies that will often work for folks in terms of just like simplifying or maybe automating meal planning? I don't know.
Yeah, I love that word, like automating. So in my practice, like when I work with somebody, I'm trying to explain to them like why this is happening. Like I really want them to understand, you know, like this is why your body is doing what you're doing. This is why you're food seeking. This is why your brain feels offline. This is why you're so tired all the time. So I really like to connect the why because like anyone, like you can seek out information, but like what do you do with that information? And so like for a neurodivergent person, they're always trying to seek out ways to like make things better for themselves, but if they don't understand why, then I often see that it just doesn't become a sustainable change. So if I can like help somebody connect to like this is why your body feels the way that it does and do like a little bit of a self-assessment of like, oh, of course I feel this way. I'm burnt out right now. What are some of the things that I need to do to like help me get out of a burnout period? So kind of connecting it more to like their needs and then coming up with a few like automated ways of feeding ourselves. So I teach people the skill of mechanical eating, which is like temporarily feeding yourself like a robot on a more of a schedule so that we can try to get back more reliable hunger and fullness cues. And also if you're experiencing any sort of malnutrition, ideally correct that in a more efficient way than if you don't have a plan. And I also I have to front load all the neurodivergent folks that like, in doing this, you may, like, your brain may not want to do it, and your brain may, you know, think of it as like a demand. And sometimes when we place a demand on a neurodivergent person, their brain wants to do literally anything else. Like PDA, pathological demand avoidance, is a common trait. And so like we have to set it up in a way where it's like you could do anything, you could feed yourself with anything, and like making it really accessible. Like I call foods like, let's choose like accessible, low barrier options. And that could be any food for them. I'm often using like packaged foods or ready-made items of like there's no steps involved. As soon as there's too many steps, the neurodivergent brain is like, it's too much work. Like I'm exhausted. I can't do that right now. I'm going to do this instead. So trying to make it as simplified as possible, and then mechanically eating it around a similar time, and trying to do that every few hours so that their body becomes more nourished, has more energy more quickly. And then that sensation of like, wow, I have a bit more energy, or wow, I could focus a bit more, or, I wasn't as overwhelmed today. Ideally, if they can like connect to that, that will help to bring buy-in, that I'm not just giving them information or making it up. So it's like I'm trying to help people connect to their own body experience, because there's the only people in the world who get that experience, to help build buy-in and sustainability of like, this is really hard and your brain's not going to want to do it. And there's a benefit, so that they'll keep pushing themselves to do a bit more. But at the same time, normalizing it, that like you will probably get to a point where you will burn out. You will probably get to a point where, this works maybe during the week, but not on the weekend. And so that we would just have to come up with another plan for that. Um, and usually like that type of approach is really helpful. And I also frame everything as an experiment. So I'll say like, this is not a goal where the outcome is a success or a fail. It's an experiment, and experiments are just collecting information, and all information is valuable. So if you are trying this out and it's not working, that's valuable information. We can talk about like, what were you doing at the time and what came up for you and what got in the way? Like that's incredibly valuable, probably more valuable than if it just works every time, because that's how we build problem solving skills. And ideally, like I'm teaching them the skill to problem solve so that they don't need me.
And it's so important for people to hear what all of it, but particularly around low barrier foods and foods that don't require a lot of preparation, because I think overwhelmingly in wellness, we hear whole foods and processed foods are bad and we shouldn't eat them, which
Mm-hmm.
obviously is a load of garbage. But it is so important for people to hear that the most important thing is to be nourished, and that these packaged and prepared foods can help you be better nourished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And like I try to talk about like, what does that even mean to be nourished? Like, how do you feel? When do you feel better? Like, it doesn't matter what the food is. If you're feeding yourself consistently over the day, and like how does that feel? Does that feel better? Yeah, okay, it feels better. Okay, well, how can we do that? What could we use? And like I like normalizing using the same food, because there's this, especially in our dietitian community, this big push on like variety. You need to have variety. But like, what does variety even mean? It doesn't mean you eat every single food out there and you make a new meal every single day. That's exhausting. It's like maybe you're having different foods occasionally. Like that could be variety to you. And like maybe you're trying a new thing once a month or once every 6 months. Like you don't have to, but you could. um, and just trying to help people stop feeling so bad about everything. Like neurodivergent people just live in shame all the time, and they take things very literally, like very black and white, or like binary thinkers of like, oh, this this food is called healthy something, so like it's good. It's like, well, that's marketing. But like I have to do this because this is healthy. I have to do this because it's good, or this is bad. But it makes them like overthink it so much that it just ends up leading to like, I can't do that at all. I'm going to do this over here, and that's bad. And so it like helping people get out of that like overthinking, overwhelm, and pressure that they put on themselves, and critiquing that they're doing all the time, because they just can't feed themselves. And then they're going to the doctor and being told they've got high blood pressure and all sorts, blood sugars are high, and now you're going to add in chronic disease management on top of they can't already feed themselves. Like,
Yeah.
makes things really, really tough. And I just see a lot of people like struggling and like
Yeah.
just living in
And what
burnout.
about medications? So, and I have very limited awareness here, but my understanding is that the medications can
Mm.
alter appetite as well. And like how do we talk about that and how do we account for that?
Yeah, so if I, could
No big
reconstruct the
deal.
medical
We'll do it
system,
today.
I would put it, I would, yeah, perfect. I would put in the guidelines that if you prescribe someone a stimulant medication, it is an automatic referral to a dietitian because, like, neurodivergent people, for one, they have such a high vulnerability of developing an eating disorder. So, like, if you already have a higher risk of developing an eating disorder and you give someone a stimulant medication that does decrease your appetite, and it's both like it decreases your appetite, but also if you think about it, if your brain can now focus on something, like, and it can finally do it, and like you feel that like it's finally working, like it is an inconvenience to stop and eat or to be interrupted. For some people it's really dysregulating to be interrupted, especially like autistic folk, like if they're really focused on something, like just being like mindful of how we would do that. But like I work with a lot of like ADHD people who are autistic and have ADHD. um, but yeah, so the stimulant medication, it's like if you're taking it first thing in the morning, like it works right away. So it's not like you're waiting like an hour for that to kick in. Like it works right away. So ideally, like we would be coaching people around like you need to eat immediately because when that medication is peaking, you're going to have the least amount of appetite and probably be the most efficient in the things that you need to do. So you really have to use that mechanical eating skill of building in some sort of structure of like, this is just something that I have to do to feed myself. Otherwise, I'm going to feel like garbage. And then when the medication is wearing off, you're extremely vulnerable to that food seeking. And if you have a complicated relationship with food, and you have that genetic vulnerability around, potentially developing an eating disorder, you can see it's like a recipe for disaster. Either people are, too restrictive, or they're restrictive and then food seeking, or they're not eating enough and just feeling like horrible all the time. And the thing that sucks is that the medication gets pulled. So you finally have something that is helpful for you, but you're not able to, take care of yourself in the way that you need to on a medication. And then it gets pulled because it's no longer safe or therapeutic. And then people are like, they're
Yeah.
spiraling because they're like, well, what do I do now? But if we just referred to a dietitian at the beginning and helped people build that skill of eating consistently over the day, and also just like being mindful of like, if you do have genetic vulnerability, like you need to have a safety plan around that. Like ideally someone is monitoring you to make sure that your weight isn't dropping too low or you're not engaging in restrictive behaviors and you're using your medication properly, because yeah, it just sucks if you can't take the medication that's really helpful for you because you also have these
And
risk factors.
in terms of, people sort of exploring their own eating plans and they're like, okay, so, I'm working with these low barrier foods. I'm rocking my mechanical eating. Like that's feeling like, part of just something I do. And then perhaps maybe their blood sugars or they're really needing to work on their nutrition. Like how then do we sort of
Hmm.
layer on top this sort of positive nutrition? Oh, like maybe this person isn't getting any fiber and they're quite constipated, or maybe we do need to watch blood sugars. How do we layer that on?
Yeah. Yeah, so I usually like show people, I'm a very visual person, so I like to show them um, like images of things just to explain some of the concepts. So like with mechanical eating, I usually show like a pyramid of just like where we're going. And so like the base of the pyramid would be like just getting adequate intake, like ideally spread out over the day, um, as a starting point so that they can get their body back online, the more reliable cues. And then from there, once they're able to do that, some people can't, they just don't bypass that level. They're so overwhelmed. So then it would probably be working with other professionals to help them, um, you know, get to a place where they could do a bit more. And then the next part would be looking more at like, do you have, a combination of macronutrients? Like, is there anything missing? And so we'd focus there next. And just like, what does that feel like in your body? Because now, okay, if you have like, if you're eating balanced meals, now your nutrition is actually lasting you longer. You have more energy. Your digestion is working better. Your hunger cues will be more reliable. You're sleeping better. But I'm trying to help them connect that part, because then they're like kind of learning nutrition skills and how it feels. And then from there, like, okay, can we look at adding in some of these other foods? So like some people I work with, they really struggle with sensory sensitivities around like fruits and vegetables. So like fruit can taste wonderful, but it can also be like bitter and mushy and brown and all sorts of things. So some people are just like, I don't, I liked a strawberry once, but then I had a couple that I didn't like, so I don't eat strawberries anymore. Like I don't trust them. But they might eat something like a squeezy pouch. So I have some people are, it's like, can we just do like a squeezy pouch of like applesauce or something to get some fiber or some of those vitamins and minerals from fruits and vegetables in? That's one way that we'll often use like a lower barrier accessible food to add that in. Um, and like connecting it to digestion too, of like, okay, when you add in more fiber and what does that feel like for you? Do you feel better? But also normalizing that like you don't have to do that to be a good person. You don't have to do that to be healthy, because then that pressure kind of complicates it and can make people go like, this is a really common thing in the neurodivergent community. They get like really excited and pumped up and they go to the store and they buy all the produce, and then it like they forget about it in their fridge because it goes in a drawer and you can't see it. And uh, it rots. And then you're overwhelmed with the idea of your rotting produce. So then you just don't open your fridge for the next month. And now everything is rotten. So like that is a common thing. So I use a lot of humor and I just like normalize it. Like, okay, we talked about fiber. Let's not go to the store and buy those boxes of organic greens. Let's baby steps. You could pick one vegetable you're going to get and put it in the open. Don't put it in the drawer. Um, and so like it just like helps people like gradually add stuff in. And then maybe we would do variety later. Maybe we would focus on like things that are missing. But then if we're adding in something like high blood sugars or high lipids or something, I always go to the Hayes health sheets as like a starting point, just because they're weight inclusive kind of recommendations around health issues, which tends to take out a lot of that like good food versus bad food language already. So I usually start there as just another way of explaining it, because often they've heard it from maybe like a health professional and it's included like, you shouldn't be eating it, that's too much of that, you shouldn't have takeout. And so like all the work that we just did to like get them to a place of eating regularly and giving themselves permission to eat food and like re-engaging with society and showering again, now they're like, well, I feel bad that I got takeout or I did this, and like that's not helpful. So I love the like just the additive approach. Like you could get McDonald's and you could add an apple to your plate. You could go and like make a meal, and if you really don't like fruits and vegetables, you could have these like squeeze pouches or applesauces on the side. Then we would just look at, is there anything missing, and just try to fill that in. Like if we need to use a supplement, we can do that. But the hope is that it's just simplifying things so that they can gradually start to diversify what they're eating on their own without feeling bad about everything. But it is tough because new information can be taken very literally and can derail
And you
someone
talked
pretty
about
quickly.
sensory, and I do want to talk about kids a little bit, because there could be parents listening to this, and you're a
Hmm.
parent yourself, and so you know what goes
Yeah.
into feeding kids, and feeding kids who might have sensory or textural issues. Like, what can a parent be watching out for? What
Hmm.
options, what alternatives can a parent be using to try and get more nutrition into their children?
Yeah. Yeah. So Yeah, so I'm a mom to a two-year-old, and we're in the stage of we don't like anything, which is so interesting as a dietitian who's trying to promote unconditional permission to eat and enjoy all foods. Um, but yeah, so I really love the responsive feeding approach, which is like a low pressure way of parents like offering food and like being really mindful of like your child's needs from a place of curiosity and without pressuring. So, one way that I would like explain it to parents is that like if your child's really struggling with the food, if they're telling you like I don't like this food, it doesn't taste the same, it's this, it's that, and you're like I just served this to you yesterday, like I don't understand. Just being really like curious, which can be hard in the moment if you're like exhausted and you have multiple children and all of that, but like curious about their experience because you might gain information that's really helpful. So like for example, like an autistic child might really like steak and let's say French fries and only baby carrots. Um, and it could be related to like the sensory experience and just like there's so many foods like I don't like that, I don't like that. But they may get the steak, but they like to eat things in a certain order. So by the time they get to the steak, the texture has changed because it's still cooking. So it could be that they really like their steak a certain way, but by the time they get to it, the temperature has changed and now they're eating it and it's not as enjoyable. So it's not that they're like rejecting the food and now it's one less food. It could just be that that experience with the steak is different from the time that they had it before because maybe they ate it more quickly. And so they're trying to explain to you like it's not the same. And you're like, it is the same. Um, so like just being really curious of like, okay, tell me what is different about it. Like what is this, what is the experience for you? Young kids,
Mhm.
that's a lot harder because they can't communicate like that. But you know, older kids can usually explain something about it so that you can start to understand their experience. And then providing like some accommodations to make the experience more, ideally tolerable. I try not to use the word enjoyable because for some people who are neurodivergent, food is not a pleasurable experience. It's just something they have to do. Um, and so having something that's tolerable can be helpful for feeding kids. And also just being recognizing that sensory sensitivities are not just food. Like it could be that the environment is too loud or the smells from cooking dinner are really intense and it makes them feel nauseous or um, their siblings eating near them and they eat all foods and are talked about in a way, well, they eat everything, you only eat those foods, makes them feel bad about the experience and they're feeling anxious at the table. So just like being around their loved ones is hard because they're noticing that they're eating different foods and like they would like to eat different foods but those foods terrify them. um, and it just makes it a very challenging experience or they're overwhelmed or like the sound of chewing can be really distressing for some people. So like if they're allowed to have headphones at the table and you're just being curious of like we're going to experiment with headphones today, let's try. And if they're able to eat more, then gives you a bit more of an
Mhm.
understanding of like, oh, maybe it's sound. Sound is actually really distressing or overwhelming and it's impacting their ability to eat. So by giving them that accommodation, does that help? But and also being clear that like we can't always have headphones. In some situations we won't be able to have them, but if it helps you right now and this works, like let's try this out. Let's experiment with it. Um, or like if you're a parent and you're trying to understand what it's like to have a food that's really distressing, like I like to use the example of like if you had a bowl of moldy yogurt in front of you, like what would that be like to take a bite of that? Like you could not. And so that's what a child is experiencing when there's an unfamiliar food in front of them. It's really distressing. It's like the idea of like putting something as disturbing as moldy yogurt into your mouth and having to like keep it there and swallow it and taste it and feel it in your mouth. It's really stressful. So anything we can do to like have really neutral language, offering food in a way that's like non-pressuring, even like just always serving it, even like family style serving. So it's there, but there's no pressure that you have to have it. Offering like familiar foods at the table. So there's never like a meal that has like nothing that they've ever seen before. There's always maybe something that they recognize if you're trying to encourage trying new foods. And yeah, just being really mindful of language. Like we don't hear parents say it all the time. They're like, oh, I never say anything about the food, but they'll say things like, "Oh, so and so never eats that food," or "Oh, don't put it on his plate. They won't touch that," or "They never try anything new." Like if you're a kid who's hearing that all the time, it doesn't make you feel very good. It doesn't make you want to try things. But then when you see your peers doing it, that can make them feel like, I'm really missing out.
Yeah.
This makes existing
Well, and I
hard, I
think,
think, for a lot of
feeding
kids.
kids is always a challenge and it really pushes on our patience. So even
Yeah.
neurotypical kids. And I think, you know,
Hmm.
one, I mean, for anyone listening to this, quite literally, like dietitians are also in their own thing, feeding their own kids. Like we do not have it down. And I
Yeah.
always, it is really
No.
hard to check your language and check your like emotional responses. And one of the things that, and I honestly don't always do it well,
Yeah.
but one of the things that I always just keep trying to remind myself is that like nothing is permanent. And just like you said, like that experiment, like everything's an experiment. And like, foods that my kids always
Yeah.
liked and then they don't like, or like foods I never thought they would eat. And all of a sudden they're gobbling up. And it's like, the more that we can maintain
Hmm.
neutrality around those foods, but also like our eating experiences together, like the more we enable that change and that shift.
Hmm. Yeah. It's so true. Um, yeah, because like eating is an experience. It's also like it's a form of communication. It's something I had to teach myself with my daughter because I was really struggling with her every morning being like, I want ice cream. And in my mind, I'm like, you have unconditional permission to have ice cream, but not right now at this moment because it's breakfast time. And I'm like, I wouldn't say that to an adult. If you want to have ice cream right now, have it. Because I'm trying to help them normalize a food. But for a child that I'm controlling what they're eating, it was such a weird mind shift for me, especially as an eating disorder dietitian. But one thing that really helped me was that like she's learning communication. So she doesn't have a full vocabulary of food. She doesn't have lifelong experience of all these different foods to draw from. She tried ice cream, loved it, and now she knows where it's kept in the freezer and is asking for it. And like that's a communication thing. And when it's someone says no to her and she's getting upset, like that's not like a moral failing as a parent. It's like she's upset because she wants something and she can't have it because I said she couldn't. And I'm offering something different, which she doesn't want now because she's upset about not having this thing that she wants. But I'm like, that's just communication. So
Mhm.
like that was one way that like really helps me to be like, of course. If she asked me to drive the car right now, I'd be like, no, you're two. Like,
Yeah.
and that would be like no questions asked. She'd probably be upset about that. But for some reason, because it's food, we just like overanalyze and overthink it so much.
Yeah. And it's
Um,
because it's
yeah.
because it's never just food, right? And I think, again and again, we come back to these conversations. Like food is never just food. It's the way we connect with each other. It has like personal and cultural meaning for us. And like the foods that offered us comfort as kids,
Mhm.
we turn to as like, it's all of these things. And, feeding ourselves is fraught with like, enough minefields. And then when it comes to like our children, for whom, obviously they're the greatest humans on the planet and we want nothing but the best for. And then it's, it is emotionally charged to feed our kids. And, even more so when they might be neurodivergent and then have these additional challenges in navigating their own self-feeding. I do want to talk about lunch boxes because I'm pretty sure no parent, I mean, I don't know who these parents are making, like cute little carrot flowers, and I'm not that parent. So I feel like most parents feel like
Mhm.
lunchboxes are a chore. Like, do you have any tips and tricks for navigating that?
Yeah. Okay. So lunchboxes is such an interesting topic because like I'm at a daycare right now, and like in my private practice with Little Spuds Nutrition, like we talk a lot about just like normalizing using, you know, any foods that are accessible to you, using low barrier foods, using your child's preferred foods. We try to talk about like incorporating things like candy into someone's like, lunch with all foods, especially around like the holidays. So there's not this like extreme food seeking of this novelty food of like a holiday food. But at our daycare, like you're not allowed to send candy. You're not even meant to be sending like a chocolate chip granola bar because they don't want chocolate. And then there's also all the like allergen foods that you can't send based on, the classroom or other child's needs. Um, and so there's all these like limitations that make making a lunch kit really hard. Um, but yeah, like you do not need to be like making homemade crackers for 6 hours every day for your kids' lunch. And I feel like some parents like they like that stuff. So it's like if you like it, you go for it. But other parents, they see that and they're like they feel guilty that they're not doing that. I think we just all have to like remind ourselves that we don't all have the same time in a day, and you don't have to do that to help your child have a healthy relationship with food. Take I'd rather give a box cracker and spend 6 hours with my child. Like that's not represented in a lunch kit when you see some kids' food. Like you don't know anything about that kid or their family. But yeah, I think just like finding foods that they like or they might try, that are affordable to you, that have some variety there. Continuing to offer new foods. Like you never know. It could be the day that their buddy next to them has a similar food and they try the cucumber. Like you never know. So putting it in there. But I really do empathize with parents who like they're on limited incomes, and like the amount of food that gets wasted in kids' lunch boxes is
Yeah.
that's a tough one. And yeah, it's not a perfect science. So I also understand parents that, they just stop sending certain things because they're like, I'm tired of throwing it away. I can't afford it. So I think we just all have to like work with the resources that we have. And if you need support with it, like call 811 dietitians, they're free, and just run it through them of like, is there anything missing in my
Yeah.
child's lunchbox as a starting point?
No, that's super good advice. And for anyone listening outside of British Columbia, so we are very lucky here in BC because we have
Right.
811 is like you can I can speak to a dietitian and it's 100% free. So you can actually get nutrition care virtually without going to see a dietitian. So it does make it more accessible. I wish everyone had access to that.
Yeah. Yeah, if there is anywhere like a nutrition professional that you could just like run it past, of just like if you're really worried, I find like if you're really anxious about how you're feeding your child, just talking to a professional, they're often not going to tell you what you need to do and how you need to do it. They're going to like go through what you're doing and help bring down some of your anxiety and like help you feel more confident as a parent that like your child is doing well, and they might go through a phase where they eat less, and like be patient, and that doesn't make you any less of a parent, and continue to do this or what is available to you. I think like that's like one of the things I love about being a dietitian is that like we're not just giving information, we're just helping people like rely more on themselves and build confidence in the things that they already know and do.
Oh my gosh, I feel like this has been so jam-packed. It is so important. No, it's incredible because I feel like we could do like 3 hours more here because I think, when we don't have this awareness, whether we're caring for a child or we're a dietitian caring for someone who might have ADHD, like it is just really a fundamental shift in how we think about what's possible, but also the strategies that we use. And I think what I appreciate so much about how you speak about this is ultimately giving people permission to do what they need to do, the thing that is right for them, the thing that feels good in their body, because ultimately that is the most important thing.
Yeah. And like, yeah, just like being like really confident and relying on yourself, especially a neurodivergent person who's like trying so hard to like fit in with the neuronormative or neurotypical community, and like they have a hard time trusting themselves. And so like just trying to come back to that like you're the only person in the world who gets to experience your body. So like how do we rebuild that trust? And then ideally like that helps them to thrive. And then they end up accessing all these things that was their goal to do, but in a way that's like fully connected to like their own personal experience, not because they were given information that they quote unquote should do this.
Okay, well, this is the perfect time to shift into the rapid fire questions. So 5 little softballs, getting to know you kind of stuff. So the first is, what's one hack that you use to keep yourself organized?
Oh gosh. I'll just use one that is in the front of my mind right now. I have Lazy Susans in my fridge. So all my condiments are on a
Yeah.
Lazy Susan, the like circular shelving thing, and I can just spin them. And it's really helpful because I don't like
Mhm.
lose as much stuff in the back of my fridge. And I have a basket for produce that's not in a drawer. So it's like more in front of me because object
Yeah.
permanence is something I struggle with. So to decrease food waste,
Amazing. Honestly,
produce
that's a
is kept up
great
high.
hack for literally everyone because I think most of us forget. They're like, oh, yeah, produce drawer does not exist when I'm hungry and I need a snack now. But speaking of snack, what is your current favorite snack?
Current favorite snack. Um, Hummus and oh, what are they called? Those like
Oh, like
cranberry
the Raincoast crisp?
almond crackers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know the yes, Raincoast crisp with it has to be the specific like
Yeah.
that onion
Amazing.
hummus.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Are
like
you
the
watching
combination.
anything good right now?
I just
Oh,
finished
tell me.
watching Mobland. It's like a gangster show on Paramount, but it was I mean, if you have a hard time with gory scenes, don't watch it. But I have bit all my nails off watching it, and yeah, it was pretty
Okay,
good. If you
we'll put
like
it in the
gangster
show notes for
movies, it,
sure.
it was
Okay.
good.
Sweet or savory, you can only choose one.
Oh,
Perfect.
oh,
I
Sour
love
Patch
Sour
Kids,
Patch Kids.
sweet.
I'm not a big sweet person, but sour sweets are 100% my jam. I love them so much. Those and like the sour
Mm,
cranberries. Now you can get like the dried cranberries with all the sour candy coating. I love those things.
mm.
Okay.
Oh, I've never had those.
Make sure I'll get like Dre to like bring you some. Okay. Lastly,
Yes, please.
the thing that surprised you most about parenting, as if there could only be one, but like what sort of stands out? You're like, oh, I did not think it would be like this.
Oh, um, I knew it was going to be tiring, like the responsibility part, but when you're having like so much fun and like laughing and like just like soaking up every moment, it shocks me how exhausted I am
Yeah.
after that. But it's like a good exhaustion. And so like I like have this like content feeling, but I was really surprised by that because like yeah, after having like a day of just like really fun memories playing, like went to the beach last night and like it was so fun and had a picnic and went in the water. And I came back and I was like, I am a shell of a human being after bedtime,
Yeah. My
but
kids
in a
are
good way.
older now, and so the needs are different. But one of the hardest things that I had to sort of overcome was that idea from when my kids were small. It's like by 7:30, like I'm out. I do nothing. I lie on the couch. I do not eat, like I'm not even upright. I am in a lying
Mm,
position because I'm exhausted. The day is over. And like to actually like be like, oh no, like you could
hmm.
maybe like go for a walk after dinner, or like you don't have to like shut down at 7:30. That was the hardest thing for me to unlearn and be like, oh no,
Yes.
it's okay. I'm not in that like wild young kid phase anymore because it is so brutally to your bones exhausting, even when it's incredible, even when it's awesome, it's tiring.
Yeah. Yeah. I always, sometimes I try to like, if I'm feeling really tired and like mad that I'm not doing other things, is my ADHD creeping in. But I like try to remind myself and like that you only get this like time once. And so like it's supposed to be exhausting. So that's my other way of just one thing I didn't realize, like, right, you only get this
Yeah.
one time.
Yeah.
So
I'm
like soak it
definitely,
up.
I'm definitely, as my kids get older, feeling that. Like my oldest has only 3 years of high school left.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh, wow. And then it's like, yeah, like he
Oh
might
my
move halfway across
gosh.
the country. I don't even know what's going to happen. And yeah, I am feeling that need to just like imprint everything on my soul while I have them.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Marilee,
I
thank
love
you
that
so
imprint.
much. It's just, there are so many like incredible, important nuggets in this conversation. I know that people are really going to learn a lot from you, and we will share all the ways to get in touch with you in the show notes so people can learn more about you.
Thank you. So nice to see you. as always.